The building is sold. You have 48 hours to get your things and get out. My name is Tom, and for the last 10 years, that building was more than just my home. It was my father's legacy. The man who said those words to me, Mr. Henderson, our new slumlord, saw it as nothing more than a cash machine. He thought he could illegally evict my family, throw our lives into chaos, and walk away with a multi-million-dollar payday. He sneered at my profession, calling me a little plumber with no power. He had no idea that the very thing he ignored, the hidden veins of the building that I knew better than any man alive, held a secret, a fatal flaw that was about to turn his golden goose into a pile of condemned dust. The trouble started the day Henderson bought our 6-unit apartment building in a quiet working-class neighborhood of the city. The building was old but solid, built by my own father, a master craftsman who took pride in his work. He'd sold it years ago, but we'd stayed on as tenants, paying our rent on time, every single month for a decade. It wasn't just an apartment, it was a community. In 2A were the Gallaghers, an elderly couple who had lived there for 30 years, Mrs. Gallagher still tending to the beautiful rose bushes in the small front garden my father had planted. In 3B was a single mother, Maria, with her 2 young kids who played on the lawn with my daughter, Lily. We were all a kind of family, looking out for each other, a rare thing in the city. Our previous landlord was a decent old man who knew everyone by name. But when he passed away, his children sold it to Henderson Holdings, a faceless corporation fronted by a notorious property developer. From day one, he was a nightmare. The heat would go out in the middle of winter, and his management company, a call center in another country, would log the complaint with zero follow-up. Mrs. Gallagher's calls about the spreading black mold in her bathroom were ignored for months. Maria's pleas to fix a broken window in her children's bedroom were met with an email suggesting she tape some cardboard over it. He was deliberately letting the building fall into disrepair, a classic slumlord tactic. After a month of this neglect, I organized a tenants association. We met in my living room. Me, my wife Sarah, the Gallaghers, and a nervous Maria. I laid out a plan. We document everything, I explained. Every call, every email, every leaking pipe. We send him formal registered letters. We build a case. We did just that, and it only made him more aggressive. In response to our formal complaint about the mold, he sent a maintenance worker who just painted over it, trapping the moisture and making the problem worse. In response to our complaint about the lack of heat, he had the audacity to issue a building-wide memo about excessive energy consumption by tenants. He was a bully, and he was treating us like insects. The illegal eviction notice was his final declaration of war. It was a cheap piece of paper slipped under all 6 of our doors. 48 hours. A blatant illegal power move, designed to induce panic and shatter our collective resolve. I immediately called him. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice tight with anger. This eviction notice isn't legal. We have rights, and we have a tenants association. I heard him laugh on the other end of the line, a dry, rasping sound, like crumbling paper. Rights? Son, the only right you have is to get your junk out of my property before my men change the locks on Friday morning. And your little association is a joke. The building's been sold to a developer for a 7-figure sum. You and your neighbors are a loose end, and I'm tying you off. And on Friday morning, they came. Not professional movers, but 2 large, intimidating men in unmarked jumpsuits. They started with the Gallagher's apartment. I watched in horror from my window as these goons with no care or respect dumped a lifetime of memories onto the pavement. A box of antique china, Mrs. Gallagher's prized possession from her mother, was dropped, the sound of shattering porcelain echoing down the street like a gunshot. She let out a cry of pure anguish. Henderson, who had just arrived, watched this with a bored expression. Mrs. Gallagher, sobbing, approached him. My china, it's all broken. Henderson looked down at the shards, then back at her. Should have packed it better, was all he said before turning away. When they got to our apartment, I stood in the doorway. You are not coming in here. I said, my voice shaking but firm. One of the men just laughed, a cruel, ugly sound, and shoved me hard against the doorframe. I stumbled back. My wife, Sarah, screamed as they began to work, moving with a brutal, careless efficiency. A lamp was knocked over, its shade cracking, a picture frame. A photo from our wedding was stomped on, the glass crunching under a dirty work boot. My 10-year-old daughter, Lily, was sobbing in the corner, clutching her favorite stuffed bear, watching as her toy box was upended onto the dirty pavement outside. I saw her dollhouse, a gift from my father, hit the pavement and splinter. Henderson walked over to me, a smug, triumphant smirk on his face. "See?" he said, gesturing to the chaos. "Problem solved. It's a shame, really. A man like you works with his hands. You'll probably never see the inside of a place this nice again once the new luxury condos go up." He looked at my work van, the logo of my small, one-man plumbing business on the side. "There's nothing a little plumber like you can do about it." I just looked at him, and a slow, calm smile spread across my face. He mistook it for defeat, but it wasn't defeat. It was the calm certainty of a man holding a royal flush. He was so focused on the building, on the money, on his own perceived power, that he had overlooked one tiny, crucial detail. He had no idea who built this place, and he had no idea what my father had told me 20 years ago about the one corner of the building, the one fatal flaw that he had secretly installed. A secret I had kept my entire life for a moment just like this. As I watched him drive away in his cloud of smug satisfaction, my wife turned to me, her face streaked with tears. "What are we going to do, Tom?" she whispered, her voice broken as she clutched a sobbing Lily. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't call the police. I made one single anonymous phone call to the city's Department of Buildings, a number I knew by heart. I simply said, "Hello, I'd like to report a potential major code violation at 123 Oak Street. You might want to do a full structural and systems inspection, starting with the main sewer line in the basement, specifically the backflow prevention system." He thought he had left me with nothing. He had no idea I had just lit the fuse on a bomb that would vaporize his entire multi-million-dollar deal. This wasn't just revenge for me anymore. This was for the Gallaghers. This was for Maria and her kids. This was for everyone's life they had destroyed in their quest to squeeze out the extra money. The secret my father had shared with me was a story of his own rebellion. Back when he was building our apartment block, he was being squeezed by a greedy, unscrupulous developer, a man cut from the same cloth as Henderson. This developer forced my father to use cheaper materials and cut corners in ways that deeply offended his sense of craftsmanship. So, my father built a secret into the very bones of the building, a piece of malicious compliance of his own. The city code at the time required a specific, high-grade cast iron backflow preventer on the main sewer line to stop sewage from ever backing up into the basement apartments. The developer provided him with a cheap, substandard part that was barely legal at the time and was now decades out of code. My father, under protest, installed it, but he installed it in a way that only he, and later I, would know. He encased the access point in a thin fake brick wall, in a forgotten corner of the basement, making it completely inaccessible for inspection or repair without tearing down a wall, and he never filed the correct permit for that specific part, creating a ticking time bomb in the city's records. "One day, son," he had told me, his hand on my shoulder, "a man who deserves it will own this building, and you'll know what to do." For 10 years, I had been the perfect tenant. I knew about the shoddy plumbing, the barely legal electrical work Henderson never upgraded. I could have reported him a dozen times, but I was quiet. I was waiting, because a small fine for a leaky pipe was nothing. I was waiting for the moment when the stakes were highest, and Henderson, in his infinite arrogance, had just handed me that moment on a silver platter. His sale to the developer was contingent on a final building inspection and the transfer of all permits, and I had just directed the city inspector to the one place in the building that would unravel everything. The week that followed was a slow burn of agony and anticipation. We were forced to move into a cramped, depressing motel room, the cost of which was a constant draining worry. The single room smelled of stale smoke and bleach. My daughter had trouble sleeping, frightened by the strange noises. My wife was a wreck, constantly on the phone, trying to find us a new apartment in a city with a brutal rental market. Every night, I had to project a calm confidence I didn't entirely feel, assuring her, "Trust me, Sarah. It's all part of the plan. Justice is coming." But every day, I would drive past our old building, a painful pilgrimage, and I saw the signs. First, a single official-looking city vehicle. The next day, there were 3, including a van from the Electrical Safety Authority. I saw inspectors in hard hats walking in and out, carrying clipboards and looking concerned. Henderson's security guards, the goons who had thrown our stuff onto the street, now looked nervous, unable to stop the men with official city badges. One afternoon, I parked across the street, pretending to be on my phone, and watched as an inspector had a heated argument with Henderson himself on the sidewalk. Henderson was waving his arms, his face red with fury, but the inspector just shook his head, made a note on his clipboard, and walked back inside the building. It was working. I made another anonymous call, this time to a friend who worked in the city planning department. "What's the word on 123 Oak Street?" I asked. I heard him typing, then a low whistle. "Tom, what did you do?" he said, half joking. "Looks like a full-blown stop work order." An anonymous tip led to the discovery of an unpermitted, inaccessible, and severely degraded sewer backflow system. Because of that, they've pulled every permit on file for the last 30 years. They're going through the whole building with a fine-tooth comb. Rumor is, the developer's lawyers are getting very, very nervous. It was working even better than I had imagined. My little tip about the pipe was the loose thread that was causing his entire sweater of corruption to unravel. The inspectors, now deeply suspicious and looking to make an example of a notorious slumlord, were finding everything. The outdated electrical wiring that was a massive fire hazard, the asbestos in the boiler room insulation that had never been properly abetted, the structural supports in the basement that had been illegally altered years ago. The building wasn't just non-compliant, it was a death trap. The climax came 2 weeks after the eviction. I was on a job, fixing a burst pipe for a client, when my friend from the planning department called me. "It's done," he said, his voice giddy. "They're condemning the building. The official report just came out. The cost of bringing it up to code is estimated to be more than the value of the property itself. The developer has officially invoked their contingency clause and pulled out of the sale." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling slightly. It was over. I had won. I packed up my tools and drove to my old street, and there it was. A massive, bright red condemned, "Do not enter" sign plastered across the front door. A beautiful, glorious tombstone for Henderson's greed. The Gallagher's rose bushes, now untended, seemed to droop in silent testament to the building's demise. And just as I was standing there, taking it all in, his black Mercedes squealed to a halt at the curb. Henderson got out, his face pale and haggard, his expensive suit rumpled. He saw the sign, and he looked like he was going to be physically sick. Then he saw me, standing there on the pavement, smiling. He stormed over to me, his face a mask of pure, impotent rage. "You," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "This was you. How could you know? How did you do this? You're a plumber. A nobody." He threatened lawsuits. He threatened to ruin my business. He threatened everything he could think of. I just kept smiling, a calm, easy smile that I knew was driving him insane. I let him finish his tirade, and then I spoke. "Like you said, Henderson," I replied, my voice calm and even. "I'm just a little plumber. And a good plumber knows that a single block forgotten pipe can poison and bring down the whole house. You didn't just buy a building. You bought a community house that feels like a family, and you disrespected it. You disrespected my father's memory, and you disrespected the families who called this place home. This isn't just about a code violation. This is about a moment where you get what you met out to others." I saw the dawning realization in his eyes. The understanding that the little man he had dismissed and humiliated was the architect of his complete and utter financial ruin. He had lost the multi-million-dollar sale. He was now the sole owner of a worthless, condemned building that the city would likely force him to demolish at his own expense. He was financially ruined, all because he had underestimated a plumber. I got back in my van, leaving him there to stare at the ruins of his empire. The payback was complete. It wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, professional, and devastatingly permanent. It was a tribute to my father's foresight, a testament to the fact that true power isn't about money or threats. It's about knowledge, knowing exactly where the weak point is, and having the patience to wait for the perfect moment to apply pressure. That night, I called the Gallaghers and Maria and told them what had happened. The quiet satisfaction in their voices was the real victory. With the official condemnation and proof of a legal eviction, we were able to launch a successful joint lawsuit against Henderson for damages, which he was forced to settle quickly. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to give us all a fresh start. A start funded by the ashes of his greed. We found a new, better place to live. And the first thing I did was plant a rose bush in our new garden for Mrs. Gallagher. They threw us out to humiliate us, but then they also had to pay in order to put us in a better place. Please leave a like and comment on my life story to help reach more people and get their own opinions. Tell me what you think about how I handled the situation.